here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
Do you have a favorite technique that you like or a sex hack that you like?
I think there's a couple of different ones. I was thinking about what to share. So I give you a little bit of a range. So I love teaching squirting technique and female ejaculation, not to over glorify a party trick, because I think that happens a lot in porn and in society. But there's one really important distinction, like especially the technique that I show in the book about how there's two, there's many types of nerve endings, but you have your somatic nerve and you have your visceral nerve, and they function differently. But once you gain that understanding that like how to produce internal pressure and also how to be with your partner and how to receive that sensation, that is such an important lesson on the different system. Just like how prostate wants to be touched is different than how the head of your penis wants to be touched, and the state that you have to be in. So I think learning that technique will really open, and also you could combine, because you could have your palm rubbing the clitoris as you rock the G-spot, but it's not exactly just a spot. Is the network or nerve that you get to stimulate at the same time. But why I brought up that technique is I think it's actually more important to teach people how to be in a receptive state for the receiver, and how to focus for the giver to like tune in to your partner. So I think synchronizing that is really important. And one of the most fascinating lessons that I learned from Barry Komrosek, he wrote the book The Science of Orgasm, and when I interview him for the book, he talks about how those internal nerves, right, for their internal sensation, and because of the hypergastric and vagus nerve, and especially the vagus nerve, how it just kind of like is wandering, is not on your spine, it's throughout your whole body. But it's the same pathway that you feel your emotion, like the motion part of your emotion. So when you have a feeling, you also have a physical manifestation of that feeling. So when you cry or you cringe or you belly laugh, like those are when those nerve is activated. So what I realized when teaching squirting, not necessarily just the water works, right? But the technique itself, it forces you to learn, one, to associate that sensation, because that sensation could kind of feel like you have to pee a little bit, but it's not exactly. And then if you tense up and you like, oh, you attach that sensation with shame, or I don't want this, then you're not in the right erotic state, right? So you have to go like, that sensation is good. And learn to feel that sensation. So there's a lot of coaching around the sensation. And one of the most beautiful part about what Barry taught me is that your ability to feel all your emotions, right? That same nerve network is as important on feeling your sexual sensation. So if you allow your body to fully feel all your emotion and not have any inhibitory system cramping it down, when you could truly allow, let go, and surrender, like truly, that's when that technique actually works. So I just like that as a lesson, because it really encompasses all the different components and what I want people to understand. But it's not really intellectual understanding, you feel it in your body. So when I need to tap into that state, and when I get into that sensation and allow my feelings to run through me, right? And that's how, and it's beautiful, like how those nerves are, as the signal, like as this orgasmic energy, right, floating up, it feels like your whole body, because it's just a wandering nerve. I'm like, oh, there's an actual science around the chakra, all those stuff. Oh, it makes sense, because you do have to be open fully in order to feel all of it. So I just found that so fascinating. So the squirting technique with the coaching, so not just the technical part, but how to put it all together, is one of my favorite sex hacks.
That's beautiful. And so when you're saying to be able to feel your emotions and how that impacts our ability to feel the sexual pleasure, orgasm, you're also referencing to all genders, right? Or are you just referring that? Yeah.
No, it was the only difference between like male and female anatomy that I find it fascinating is that the vagus nerve, where it sits in male body, is like way deeper into the anal cavity. That's why there's like those massive toys and things, because you can't reach quite, like if you're not high enough. So now I'm going like, oh, this is why they made all those toys, because it's like you can't really get a comparable cervical sensation to female body if it's not all up in there. So I'm like, oh, it all makes sense now.
It's so funny. I came across a meme where it was Cher, and she was acting like God, and she was like, haha, I put the G spot in the ass of the guy. She's like, I cracked myself up. And it's just so funny to think about like the anatomy of all that. Yeah. See, I love this conversation, because this is something I talk a lot about with my male clients and students, of like how important it is for them to develop that relationship with their emotions too. And they're like, well, no, I'm functioning just fine. And I'm like, yeah, well, it can also amplify your sexual pleasure and your orgasmic potential. And then they're like, I'm interested. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's they're missing half of the equation sometimes, because if you talk about from like a yin and yang perspective, or like their parasympathetic side, like how to receive, because I think most straight men could live their entire life like feel perfectly fine with their sex life, and they have never have a prostate orgasm, like any internal sensation, but they wouldn't necessarily like prone to explore that. But it's such an important lesson to feel it in your own body, because then you go like, oh, it does require anal level trust with someone, doesn't it, to be penetrated. So then you could receive more, and you do need to be in that state in order to feel it. And I think it would create such higher level empathy to your partner if you have their own experience in your body. And it has nothing to do with like it's just to do with our anatomy and how it lays, like how it lays out on your body. So I think all their attachment to sexual orientation or gender expression has nothing to do with it besides the biology itself, and to feel something on the other side. It's just the same muscle that it requires you to be tough, right? And there's another muscle that requires you to be vulnerable. To have their flexibility to access both, I think is beautiful.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.